Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast with Austin and Marty. And today we are going to do an off-season episode, specifically how to not mess it up,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
how to actually not only how to not mess it up, but how to actually make some progress.
Yeah, because that's, the biggest thing here will be for me, because that's exactly what I'm in right now. And obviously you're in as well too. So we can talk about what's been making our own growth phase successful and or unsuccessful.
Sure, yeah, for sure. And you know, I think I think unfortunately like we've done so much information, and I know you talk about it with your clients and online and myself as well, that how to how to correct a lot of the things that go array through your dieting phase. So how to correct your hormones and your metabolism and all of these things that we want to accomplish after a fat loss phase or after a contest prep. But the
Hmm.
problem is a lot of people, even though they may get to that point, they never really stay in, they never really stay in the surplus long enough to really make much progress beyond that.
Yeah. So what would you say would be a good amount of time, at least we'll say post show, to stay in the growth phase to really make some improvements for your next show?
Yeah, and I think you can still make some progress while you're correcting those, those quote unquote metabolic downregulation and all those things, because still you can still gain muscle during those times, right?
Mhm.
But I think there's context too, of course. So,
Yeah.
um, is it a male? Is it a female? Are they natural? Are they enhanced? I mean, what are their genetics like? Um, Even then, genetics are always going to play a big role in that. And I'm always going to consider that with the person. They have goals. And especially if I've worked with them before, I always try to be honest with people. Look, I'm not going to say, hey, you're going to gain 20 pounds of muscle, 20 pounds of stage weight by next season. Um, is that possible for some people? Yep, it is. But is that possible for a lot of people? Probably not, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so just being completely honest. Now, can you change the look of your physique in a year? Oh, absolutely you can. Now, when I say a year, I mean an actual year, not that I compete in fall of 2020 and then I compete again in fall of 2021. That's not a year because I have to prep
Hmm.
again.
Hmm. Exactly. Thank you for saying that.
Right. So what do we say? We say a year, and actually mean a year. I mean, I think a year is a reasonable amount of time, because if we can to make some like actual progress, assuming the person doesn't have any really, really bad um, health issues that they need to work through. So let's assume that they do not, and they take the first 3 to 6 months of the off season, they're really correcting all that stuff and also taking advantage of being very insulin sensitive, and they're having a good rebound and doing all those things post show. You guys can go back and listen to our reverse dieting episode, talk
Hmm.
about that. So once you kind of get past that point, that's where things get, I feel like that's where people, they lose interest because they're not that lean anymore. And B, they get bored because it's just so monotonous, and the results are just very slow. I mean, they're slow, and you're not going to take week or photos week to week deep in your off
Hmm.
season and see changes like you are in your contest prep. You're just not. Um,
Yeah, exactly. The visible changes just aren't there. That's probably one of the biggest things. And that's why a lot with my clients and my coaching, I have to always look at the other improvements, such as you're now allowed to have more leniency potentially with foods, depending upon food sensitivities and digestion. You're also able to train harder. You're also able to get stronger. So you have to look at the cooler things there, other outside of the visual aspects, because exactly, you're not, if you're taking photos weekly in an off season phase, and and you're not, it's going to be depressing potentially at some points for most people, especially if you do have either a sluggish metabolism or you're not the most genetically gifted person. It will definitely be a whole lot harder than the next person to try to get to that. And that's something that I'm doing myself here, is that I'm only doing my progress photos once every 2 weeks here and there, just to see, because yeah, I think weekly right now is just something that I don't need.
Yeah, I had that conversation with someone the other day, and I don't do this with all my clients. There are people I have do weekly photos, especially, and when I say that, a lot of that's more just to make sure they're not getting fat type of thing,
Mm.
you know, not
Yep.
because I expect them to gain a pound of muscle a week or anything, crazy like that. It's just because I'm more so watching body composition. But I do the same thing for myself. I literally, right now, especially since I haven't competed for, uh, let's see, it's August, over a year.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I do my progress photos like once a month.
See,
And yeah,
there
because
you go.
there's just no point in me doing them more. I mean, outside of, I can get a gauge on body composition, and my calorie surplus is pretty small, so I can assume nothing tremendous is probably going to occur in that time frame. Now, like I said, some other people, I may do it a little bit more often just for body composition purposes.
Yeah,
Um,
especially if they are prone to be gaining fat more
right,
easily,
for
right?
sure. Yeah, that, and just um, also just comparing photos, right? I can go back and look at older photos, which I do like to do. That I do like to, whether it's a side by side or going back through their files and looking at older photos.
Mm-hmm.
That can be helpful. Now, even that gets challenging at times too, because if you have body fat to the point where you lose some of that separation, it's just going to be difficult to see the progress. You're going to feel it in that you'll have the way, maybe potentially like the way your clothes fit, and that could be because you have a little bit more subcutaneous fat making you look bigger. But
Mm-hmm.
we there's a that that idea of trusting the process is so suited for a successful off season, because you will get to a point where the body fat's a little uncomfortable, the separation's probably not as good, you're not seeing the visible progress um, as much as you would like to keep you mentally sane. You're all these things are getting a little more challenging to um, stick to, because you're just not sure, like, am I actually making progress?
Mm-hmm.
you know um, you got to you're going to naturally ask yourself that at times. I ask myself that, and at times you're not going to know either, because you're not always going to be able to see it. You can see that the scale goes up, so you can see that the scale goes up and you're not getting much fatter. That's about the best indicator that you could have
Oh,
you know
absolutely. Yeah, isn't that the dream, to be putting on pretty much entirely muscle? Like, I think that some of the numbers that are out there is like, but if you are in the right body fat percentage or whatever else, that you can put on 0.6 of a pound will be muscle, and 0.4 of a pound will be fat. So if you're putting on mainly muscle, that's the wonderful thing. And that's just it. I'm finally here hitting the uncomfortable phase, I'll call it. Whereas, yes, I am, fatter than I'd like to be during my current bulk situation. But that is something that I really, really try to push onto anybody, is that you are going to have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I can't tell you how much that statement is true for any off season that you're going to do, because without that, you won't be able to bust through to those, like, get those muscle gains, right? You're just going to have to stay on the path, like you said. Trust the process. And sometimes there might be a couple like a couple of weeks. Yes, I said that, a couple of weeks where you don't have that much progress, but especially if you are not brand new at this and you have been training for years like Austin and you're going to have to really push that envelope some way, somehow, to get there, whether it is not necessarily force feeding, but it's definitely going to be trying out some training variations that you maybe you haven't done, or getting into a different groove, especially if you want to bring up a body part that you don't have as your best body part. You are going to have to do some eating that you're probably not going to be happy about, and you're definitely going to take some photos you aren't going to be happy about, because I know that I have those have those photos where it's the morning and the smile is not exactly on my face in the photos themselves, but it's so the plus side is like I was saying earlier, is that you really do have to look for the other intangibles in terms of like, do you feel better? Are you sleeping better? Are you recovering better than where you were in prep? Are you able to go do things and enjoy things more? You're, like we talked about too, during the growth phase, cardio should not be a big focus, if at all, especially depending upon what you want to do to keep your cardiovascular health happy. So now you have more time to be discovering hobbies or being social, anything like that. So taking care of your mental health is a heck of a lot easier during a growth phase. And not only that, to make it successful, mental health has to be there, because without that, it's gonna be a struggle.
Yeah, and I think mental health is one of the things that probably prevents people from making a lot of progress, because they just won't allow themselves to get to that uncomfortable, space. And we talked about this. Why do people go on this yo-yo cycle? Why do they not stick to a surplus longer? And a lot of it's just because body image. They just don't like the way that they look, and they aren't okay with eating more, right? I mean, it's that the idea of it's that simple. Obviously, the actual psychological part's much more complex, like what drives people to think like that. But yeah, that's a big limiting factor, that the progress can be slow. People don't have the patience. There's no instant gratification whatsoever. It's, you know, um, but yeah, so with that being said, what kind of stuff should we be looking at? Well, you definitely want to make sure that you do have some marker of progression, right? So if your photos are progressing very, very slowly, what's some other things that we can look at? Well, I mean, training. Um, you should have some type of progression built into your training. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at training, and this isn't a training discussion, but if your training is primarily based around progressive overload, then you should be getting stronger, right? Um, does it have to be every single workout necessarily? Well, no, but it should be on a pretty consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
Are you someone that does well with more volume? Maybe you're doing phases where you push the volume up and then you deload, and then you scale back up and then you deload. I mean, so you have to have some type of progression built into your training. So that should be a focus. It's funny because I see people get so focused on body composition and feeling like they have to do more, that they just don't recover and don't have very productive training. I have seen, and again, I'm not saying this is for everyone, because I just started with a guy today that I actually, very different, well, it wasn't today, it was a few weeks ago, but very different type of situation where he does thrive with more overall volume. I actually have him training 6 days a week most weeks, which I don't do with most people, because that's a lot of training for an advanced person,
Mm-hmm.
so, but that just is what works for him. Now, other people I've had where they get so focused on doing more and more that I cut them back to 4 days a week, and they're like, holy crap, I'm getting strong as hell.
Right.
You know what I mean? And yeah, because they aren't recovering, they're doing too much, and they're just not, their nervous system isn't recovering, their joints aren't recovering, they just don't have adequate time. And also, they mentally have the wrong focus when they go into the gym. A lot of people think that fatigue and moving through a workout very quickly, or, that's the types of things that they should be looking at, in terms of progression. Well, no, I mean, if anything, this might be a time where I don't care if you sit around and rest a little bit longer. I want you to have maximal performance on your sets if you want to get stronger and get bigger, right? So yeah, training should be something that you're looking at. You mentioned some other good stuff. Recovery. You mentioned recovery. So those are other things you can look at. What kind of things are you going to have your clients look at for recovery?
I definitely look into sleep. Check out our podcast that we did on sleep, because this is just it. When you have not only adequate but over adequate food, calories, vitamins, minerals, you
Right.
should be having sleep be a priority there. And then obviously looking into getting a really good massage therapist. I've always believed in this. When you grow, you are going to grow and create what they're called contractures inside of your muscles, those are what people call knots. And being able to work out those knots will not only save you from injury, but also be able to keep you growing in the right way. So having a good relationship with a very good practitioner, which I would probably have you look into someone that has something called trigger point therapy or myofascial release. That's who I've had the best kind of success with. It depends upon where you're looking at. Some people will call it deep tissue, along those lines. Relaxation massages will do just that. If you're a high stress individual, they will give you relaxation per se, and maybe you need that for if you're busy. Sorry, if you're at a high stress job, that will work well for you, but it won't really do anything in terms of having the muscle be recovered. And then also, I believe in finding the right chiropractor as well, especially if you're doing anything that loads the spine, like squats or anything along those lines. Because yeah, having yourself be put back into alignment can be not only life-saving potentially, but definitely can lead you to not be building any kind of imbalanced muscles, such as I remember going all the way back years ago when I first found my chiropractor. I was 2.5 inches out, and they made it look like I had a short leg, but I didn't. So one of my feet I was shifting that hard to my left side, and yeah, having that be fixed and having the muscles massaged around that really saved me there. Because what's the worst thing that can happen to you during your attempt at having a great successful growth phase would be getting injured or getting hurt. That will not only put the blues on your training and yourself, but that will put a halt to your progress.
Right. So recovery, and you mentioned sleep, and basically other recovery modalities that you can, manual therapies. So, um, not everyone wants to budget those things. Then they can do some self type of therapies, foam rolling and certain types of static stretching and stuff post workout. And those things can help. They're not going to replace a good manual therapist. They aren't.
No.
But there's something. Basic mobility exercises, stuff that you might want to do. And we've talked about warming up and all that stuff before in other podcasts. But yeah, I totally agree. I tried to look at people. I tried to look at things that can increase recovery, and those are the types of things that I want my clients to focus on. I don't want them to sit there and just dwell on the fact that they've gained body fat.
Exactly.
Right? I want them to look at what things they can improve. So, like I said, training, recovery. Now that can be sleep. We can have them, if they have some type of fitness tracker, they can actually track certain things. Like a lot of these devices will track like heart rate variability. Now you can look at that. Resting heart rate. That's an easy one that I use with a lot of people because they can check it on their damn wrist their neck. If we're seeing resting heart rate climb and climb and climb and climb and they're stressed out, then they probably aren't recovering. But those things are pretty easy things that we can do. And there's, this is where, this is where I always try to get people to think about how they view things, because it's funny, we talk about recovery and different, basically data that we can track. So training, what are you doing? Do they log their training? That's fine. You can log your training. You can log these numbers like heart rate. You can look at things like, or if people are looking at other data like their blood pressure and blood glucose and, all these things, you have to not stress yourself out looking at all these things. Also, I always want to throw that out there to people, because I get approached. We put out this information to be helpful, and I get approached by these people so often that I can tell are so neurotic and so hung up on all these things that they're literally just creating constant anxiety, because they hyper focus on these numbers. And I get some of these inquiries where the data that they give me, I can tell that this person's cortisol is probably through the roof without even working with them. I'm looking at their data. I'm like, all right, let's step back for a second. Like, this is literally, looks like all that you literally do is compile data all day long for yourself. I'm like, that is totally not the message that we're trying to get across.
Yeah.
It's, don't stress yourself out trying to not be stressed out. It's very ironic when that happens. So recovery, nutritionally, you brought up a good point in that recovery should never really suffer because of your nutrition, because you're eating plenty of food.
Yeah.
Right. That's never really a thing. I mean, and even then, even in a calorie deficit, your recovery doesn't suffer from nutrition until you start getting really deep into it.
Yes.
It's not something that happens right away. So recovery almost always suffers from cumulative fatigue, right? To your body, to your nervous system, to your joints, all this stuff. So it's probably not nutrition related. Now, as far as nutrition goes, there are some really basic things that you can do that will help you to be successful in terms of your muscle growth and body composition. And probably the easiest one is just be in a reasonable calorie surplus. There's no reason to be in a massive calorie surplus.
Oh yeah.
So it seems so simple, but what I eat and what Marty eats has literally no bearing on the calories that you guys should eat. You can use basic stuff, rate of weight gain. Well, it should be a reasonable rate of weight gain. And let's assuming that you're not right after a show and you're not just filling glycogen and stuff, you shouldn't be gaining 10 pounds a month. You're not going to gain, most people are not going to gain muscle that fast. There are situations where, you'll come off a contest, you're going to gain weight quicker because it's water and it's glycogen. If you're enhanced and your hormones go up, you're going to gain weight quicker initially, But outside of those things, in a stable environment, you're not going to gain weight that fast. No, doesn't matter who you are. There's very few people that are going to gain weight that fast, or should anyhow, I guess. Just don't be in a ridiculous calorie surplus. It's funny because I post kind of a monthly, it's not every month, it's maybe like every 4 to 6 weeks I do like a little off-season update, and I post my macros and all that stuff. And someone asked me last time why I was eating so much and in such a huge calorie surplus. And I said, man, I only gained 2.5 pounds last month. I was like, I'm not in a big, I'm not in a big surplus. So, everyone's going to be a little different. There's people that are a little more susceptible to fat gain. You're probably going to have to go a little bit slower. Ladies, you're probably going to go a little slower than the guys. Your ladies probably aren't going to need to gain 6 to 8 pounds. Even ladies don't need to gain a couple pounds a week. It's too much.
Oh,
usually.
Definitely.
way too much for most women. Um, am I missing anything on that little bit?
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so. No, no, not for that. No.
so. Yeah, calorie surpluses should always be reasonable. And then monitor, beyond that in nutrition, monitor your nutrient partitioning. So visibly, are you gaining more fat than you are muscle? Or did you gain 5 pounds on the scale and you visibly gained 5 pounds of fat? That type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Blood glucose. You can check blood glucose. That's an easy one. We don't have to really talk about that much because I'm sure we've talked about it before.
Definitely. Yep.
Um, but yeah, really easy stuff to just kind of gauge what that, like where that weight is coming from, right? I guess, if you will.
Yeah. So you can use things like measurements if you really, really want.
Sure.
Just
That's
not
good.
only
Yep.
not only is it hard to do measurements on yourself, I have a measuring tape that does it kind of hooks into itself. It's one of those guys that you like, it's not just like a measuring tape that a tailor would use. So if you are going to use measurements, please use measurements at the same time of day. Like obviously taking measurements of your waistline at nighttime versus the morning would make a difference for most people, because people will have some form of potential bloating per se, especially if you are in a very, we'll say, serious growth phase. You're going to be overeating more calories than you would during a prep phase. And yeah, it also really try to make sure that you're taking them at the same spot, like as you're taking them flexed or not flexed. You're putting them around your navel, you're putting them around your calf at the same spot or whatever. But unfortunately, too, a reason why I don't like measurements is because they can be convoluted as well, due to you could be gaining fat on them as well. So knowing too is where skinfold calipers coming into it. If like well, yeah, I don't know of anyone that can really successfully do skinfold calipers on themselves. However, I was trained in doing them, and I remember using them when I was a personal trainer, and they were a decent tool to use. Would be body fat percentage. And so, yeah, knowing your body fat percentage is not only difficult to do, but using one of those electrical devices where it's like especially the handheld ones, which are funny because they kind of go through your hands and your body. And especially if you're a girl, you have what they kind of go through your shoulders, and they go through what your boobs, and what are boobs? Predominantly fat. So that's going to really throw those off. And not only that, but those little devices are usually plus or minus 7% off of what you actually are. So the variation in a lot of body fat tests are just hilarious at best. And I know using the dunk tank or getting a DEXA scan is very expensive. So it's not something that you necessarily couldn't look into, but it's something that is a tool if you really do want to use it. It's just, yeah, don't really think that it's going to be your true body fat percentage number. But if you use the same gauge, it's still going to be the same percentage off per se. So therefore, that could be a useful tool for it. But as Austin said, getting wrapped up so far inside of your head on the numbers is a way to destroy your progress for sure. Like if you have a week where your weight either doesn't go up, or only it doesn't go up as much as you want it to, and you have these astronomical expectations of your weight to go up, that is a way to lose for sure. Because yeah, we all know how much it damn sucks if you've wanted to gain like a pound a week or whatever it is, and you don't. Sure, but having that derail you is just not a, we'll call it a championship attitude. It's just not the way to kind of think of things. So, and obviously having a coach around to be able to talk that about is helpful. But when you're doing it for yourself, is being objective, right? Because like, especially if, let's say, on picture day or whatever, did you have a crappy day yesterday? Did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Because doing that, you're either going to take a look at those photos and say, I look like a fat piece of crap. Or maybe if you had like the best day ever and you had a bunch of fun with your friends out on a hike, or you did something that you really enjoy, you might see them in a different light. So being very self-aware is going to be an objective, is going to be a key to having a successful off season as well. Also paying attention to your digestion. I can't begin to tell you about this enough. Myself right now, I'm actually running something called SIBO protocol, for which SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because I believe I was eating a little bit too crappy over the last little bit when I was moving. So I was doing lots of takeout and things like that because I didn't want to have a bunch of groceries around the house because I was moving my fridge and that would be annoying. And B, I was lazy. Let's be serious, because I would, yeah, you know what? I will actually say I wasn't lazy. I was just too damn busy to really go out grocery shop and cook. And then I was cleaning the oven and everything else. So yeah, it's taking care of your gut health, like making like one of the few mandatory supplements I really have on on all of my clients' plans is a great probiotic. And I've mentioned it before. I like Garden of Life's Primal Defense. It's just the one I found that's the best for you. And because there will come a time during your off season, in your growth phase, where you will stop getting hungry, eating your food, and it will suck. And you will not want to necessarily eat the food. You'll either get sick of X food or Y food or Z food. And it could be potentially due to your guts not digesting food correctly. People don't really understand fully that we are not supposed to be gassy. We're not supposed to fart. That is your body retaliating against the food you are currently putting into your body. And also, one of the things I pay attention to fairly heavily is how many bowel movements a day people have. And ideally, in a super great world, it'd be meal in, meal out. And I mean that. So if you have 5 meals a day, you should be having 5 bowel movements a day, because that it should be like a smooth factory. That's ideal. I have very few people that get to that point because it's so hard to not have either a food sensitivity or be able to have something that doesn't disrupt your digestive tract. But if you are someone that only has 1 bowel movement per day, that's really not great at all. And not only that, but two, your digestion can take, when you eat something, it can potentially take all the way up to 72 hours before you'll see that in the toilet. I know that could sound gross, a little bit TMI, but that's how long it can take, especially if you eat the wrong kind of food. It can get stuck in there. That's why having the correct types of fiber, especially in your off season, which I know it sucks, you're already overeating potentially and you're not that hungry, but getting your vegetables in and getting your correct type of fiber can not only save your digestive health, but keep you growing in the right way.
Oh man, uh, that is a great addition to this episode too, because I have had to constantly test my digestive knowledge during my current growth phase.
Have you?
um, and I consider myself pretty versed in digestion,
Yeah.
but man, I've had to really pull out all the stops because I've just had to, and part of this is too, as you get more experienced and you get further and further and further away from whatever you're supposed to be genetically, naturally,
your set point. Yeah.
it's going to get harder. You're going to have to eat more food. You're going to probably have more room or less room for progress. Your progress is probably going to get slower. You're probably going to have to get a little more crafty. I mean, that's just, it's a lot harder to gain muscle when you've been training 20 years versus 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is. So, the main thing, keeping the digestive motility moving, actually having things move through at a steady pace, making sure that you're having enough bowel movements, like you said. Yeah, I mean, I know for me, dude, I have at least 4 times a day.
See, there you go. That's good.
Yeah, right around that, I would say. And it's literally clockwork. Like I almost shit myself every morning when I get out of bed because I have to go immediately. Like
Yep.
I have to go straight down because it's ready. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Now granted, I'm eating a ton of food, but yeah, digestion's also very much on that circadian clock. So
You got it.
being consistent with meal times and stuff can help. Not only with hunger, but with digestion. So if you have a consistent schedule, the more consistent, the better.
Yeah, be
Typically.
habitual. Have
Yep,
habits.
for sure. Figuring out, figuring out what foods you need to eat. And yes, there, this is a situation where it might not be totally realistic to eat 110% whole, unprocessed food
Mm-hmm.
constantly. There's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no possible way that I could eat almost 7,000 calories and 1,100 grams of carbs with rice. I can't do it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You guys can make fun of me if you want, but I can't do it.
You friggin' pussy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now if I was in a contest prep and I was super hungry, I could probably do it for a couple days, right?
Yep.
No problem. But what you're dealing with here is your hunger signaling, and your ghrelin levels are basically zero. And why is that? Well, it's because it's a compensatory mechanism, right? Your body doesn't want you to eat anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's saying, why are you still eating? I am not hungry, right?
Yep.
So you have to figure out, not only your palate, your palate will change totally. I mean,
Big time.
it's the same in a fat loss phase, right? Why the hell does everything taste so good when you're
Yeah,
hungry? Well,
hyper
because you're
palatable.
hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the complete opposite too. If you've ever been pushed um, food wise to that extreme, that's kind of where I'm at now. In that, man, it's so hard everything tastes gross. Basically, it's all gross, all of it. And when I mean all of it, I literally mean all of it. I could go to McDonald's and it's just like, this is gross, you know? Um, so that's just my body's way of saying, we don't want you to eat anymore. We're going to make everything taste really disgusting. And so, figuring out what food you can eat, what food you can tolerate, digestion wise, a nice mixture of some faster digesting foods along with your typical whole foods. Like Marty said previously, you really shouldn't be having any vitamin and mineral deficiencies. That's not like, so I'm not really too worried about somebody having some processed food. One little thing, and this is such a small detail, but I'm just going to mention it because I ran into it the other day, is if you are eating, so if you do have a high carbohydrate intake, especially, and you are eating some easier to digest processed things like cereals, perhaps, or like ground type, like cream of rice and those things that are ground and more processed, be careful with the ones that are all fortified with vitamins and iron.
Oh God, thank gosh you're mentioning this. Yep.
I had, and and I've had this more than once, but I had a guy recently that he was, very high carb intake. He needed to eat like almost 1,000 grams carbs. It was just a lot. And his iron levels were through the roof because he was eating so much cream of rice that was fortified with iron, right? And plus whatever iron he was getting through his protein sources. So like,
Right.
holy shit, we need to cut this back immediately. So, just kind of be aware of that stuff, because they do that on purpose, because typical diet is really poor in micronutrients, so they fortify these foods. So if you are eating any of those processed foods, just be careful that you're not
Yeah.
getting 9,000% of your daily value of iron.
Oh, frig, they were fortifying pastas. Like I think
Oh yeah,
there was every damn orange juice out there was fortified with calcium and everything else in there. And yeah, in being hypervitamin or hypermineral is not a good thing by any stretch. Like who here remembers back in the day taking Animal Pack and your piss being neon yellow forever? So it's definitely like needing a multivitamin is, you know what, like, yeah, we have to think why that's why they're called supplements. Like we've talked about on our podcasts about the best and worst supplements, is that a multivitamin, multi supplement, or sorry, multi mineral for me is not really necessary. Especially, if you are eating an eclectic diet, you are eating some fruits, some vegetables in there at some points like that, and not eating nutrient devoid foods all the time, you should be fine. And yeah, blood work will be able to tell you those things as well. But yeah, Also, so some other things I think, well, frig man, I think that's pretty darn good. I don't know if I have many more tips other than I would say definitely find the training that you enjoy for sure as well. If you are hating the style of training, you're probably not going to want to do it, and therefore that's not gonna take you to progress as well as much as you like as in that thing too. But then also, yeah, being able to do you in a sense, but also do the exercises that you need to do as well. For instance, I know that deadlifts or rack deadlifts are the best thing that will build my traps, and nothing else really does. And I hate doing them, but I know, like, but I do put them in my rotation here and there because I know that's what I need to have them grow. So trying to think here if I got anything else that I could say. How
I'll
about
add
you?
to that little training bit there, just
Mm-hmm.
because this was exactly what we discussed right before the call. The just because you enjoy something doesn't mean it's right thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's
Yep.
that one too, also, and this is probably a little bit less common. Well, I don't even want to say that honestly. Uh, there are there are very certain like personality type that we get a lot of in the industry. These more more is better. They thrive on excess. They kind of secretly like pain, right? Type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yep,
And that's
they really wish they had DOMs after every workout.
right. Well, you know, the problem is if you're not recovering, again, go back to where we talked about recovery, you're not going to progress. So just because you like to train 7 days a week doesn't mean you should. Uh, just because you psychologically that's the training that you enjoy doesn't mean it's the training that you should do. So yes, psychologically, it is important to enjoy your training so you can get motivated to do it, but it's also important to realize that you only have a finite amount of recovery resources,
Yeah,
you know.
for sure.
So just make sure that you're not burning the candle on both ends there. I used to be that same way where I love to just be in the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be in the
Yep.
gym, love to be in the gym, love to do more. So what kind of training did I gravitate towards? Well, higher volume, because I read that it worked, and it does work for some people, and it does work in the right situation. But all I was accomplishing was I was just, basically destroying my nervous system and not making
Mm-hmm.
any progress. So, you know, just be sure that you're not getting caught in that trap. There will be times where you have to do things that you don't like to do. And
Yep.
I just, I think a great takeaway with all that is physically, physical difficulty of an off season is one thing. Yes, the training can the training should be hard. I like the people that say, "Oh, the training's the easy part." I'm like, I don't think you're
I
training
yeah, I beg to
correctly.
differ. I said that when I was younger, but
Yeah,
now I don't say
I'm
that as
like,
as
I'm
much.
like, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I can pretty much, yes, my eating is very difficult now because it's so high, the food's so high. But I would say in general, the training just scares the shit out of me more than anything.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, just make sure that mentally you're in the right place. I think that most people just hold themselves back because they are, like I
Yep.
said, afraid to get too heavy or afraid to get too fat. And yes, those should all be concerns until, as long as you're not limiting yourself, or they're afraid to not to go so long without competing. All
Yep.
these things that hold people back. Because I would say, as a majority, the amount of people that have successful off seasons, as they get further into their bodybuilding, as it gets more difficult, it's pretty small percentage of
Yeah.
people. It's a very small percentage, because you can do anything in the first few years and you're going to make progress. It doesn't really, as long as you eat more food than you burn and you train with weights, you're going to gain muscle,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's a whole different ball of wax when when you've already gained 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds on your frame, especially for some of these guys and some of these girls. It just gets really tough, and mentally it's hard not to question things. You're like, man, am I making progress? Or yeah, I question myself all the time. I'm like, shit, this. this is hard, you know?
Yep. Yep.
It's like, this is really, really hard. Like, I have to eat how much again?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yep. And then the only other thing I could say is you could potentially might need to try something training wise that is outside of your comfort zone,
sure.
because especially if you've been training the way that you enjoy training, like Austin said, he was doing volume training, it wasn't doing him any success, just because trying something that's completely different, whether it's holding back on the training days and getting uncomfortable, could be your ticket to success. Which yeah, don't be being set in your ways always and forever in training styles could be exactly what's holding you back as well. Yeah.
Yep. 100%. So just evaluate, always just evaluate. We talked about a bunch of little things here. I give people, sometimes people ask me that aren't my clients. I give them, let's say, real simple tasks. Sit down, write out what you struggle with, where you think your gaps are, work on those the most,
Yeah.
you know,
Perfect. Yeah, exactly.
be objective as best you can. So cool, guys. I hope there was some nuggets in there that were helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I think that people take a lot away from that, and I know I did too. So hopefully both of our bulking phases go very well. And from Austin and Marty here at the Mind Body Broadcast, we'll catch you next time.